Welcome to Weathering Minds, where we discuss how the weather outside affects the weather inside your mind. I'm your host, Daisy Whittington, and today we're going to be talking about interactive weather journaling and how it can help different types of anxiety, specifically climate anxiety. So let's get into it. So, as we talked about last month in our January episode, climate anxiety is a big issue for hundreds of thousands of people out there. Now, if you haven't seen episode 3, go check it out, climate anxiety. I'm going to recap a bit of what it is before we get started because the two subjects are kind of interlinked. So, climate anxiety is defined as heightened emotional stress in response to climate change. This can be literally anything from wildfires to deforestation to literal just like the idea of climate change or climate induced events. This can manifest in many different ways. It can manifest in the feelings of hopelessness, grief, anger, guilt, and in some extreme cases, existential dread and kind of midlife crises. And climate anxiety is very different from other anxieties because although it can be managed, it is a real fear that can't go away because scientifically it won't. And towards the end of the episode, we looked at some different solutions. Like I said, if you haven't seen it, please go check it out. Shameless plug. But yeah, so we talked about some different coping strategies on how to deal with climate anxiety. Some being going outside, taking a little stroll to just get some fresh air and see how pretty nature is and how it's thriving. It could be seeking professional help through a therapist, just seeking help from a friend or family member, and even just joining like an eco club to reflect that negative energy into positive energy. But one solution that we didn't talk about in that episode, because I found it so fascinating that I thought we should make an episode on it, was interactive weather journaling. Now you may be wondering, what is exactly interactive weather journaling? Well, it kind of is what it sounds like in the name. It's a journaling method where you reflect on how specific weather patterns, climate changes, or certain prompts that you are given make you feel. If you don't know what journaling is, if we want to get very general in the terms, is journaling is a therapeutic method used by a lot of people to just write down and reflect on their emotions. It's a great reflection process. Great reflection skill. You don't even need to have a therapist or anything to do it. It's just a really healthy habit to have. So weather journaling, interactive weather journaling, is when you're reflecting on how these specific weather things make you feel, and specifically for people with climate anxiety, how you feel when your anxiety is triggered. And yes, while it may sound a bit silly to someone who is a bit arrogant or uneducated on climate change, it can genuinely make people feel so much better who are struggling with the grief and anxiety that comes with climate anxiety. This is a very positive way to take climate action rather than just worrying and kind of just spiraling into a hole. So when I was doing my research for this podcast episode, I found a really fascinating study group that happened at Yale. Yale University conducted a 4-week experiment on weather journaling, which is kind of a specific topic, which was making me find it was hard to find things that related to it online. So I was really excited when I found this. But anyways, back to what I was saying. Yale conducted a 4-week experiment on weather journaling for people with climate anxiety. And this quote explains it perfectly. I'm going to talk about it in a second because it does kind of have some big words, but this is from one of the students who initiated the study group. The objective was to give people a safe space for reflection about climate anxiety, climate injustices, environmental racism, including how we might witness it, how we might experience it, and how we might perpetuate it. We hoped that understanding one's own relationship with the environment and climate change could spur positive, justice-centric climate action. Okay, let's break that up into 2 bits because that was lots of words, and we want to have that context before we get into like the specifics of weather journaling. So the objective was to give a safe space to people to reflect on climate anxiety, climate injustice, and environmental racism. So we already know what climate anxiety is. Climate injustices is specifically when people, and this kind of links with environmental racism too. I mean, racism is kind of an odd, in my opinion, odd term to use when you're talking about the environment. But climate injustices basically means anyone who is purposefully doing something to harm the environment. So that could be as small as littering, that could be dumping gallons of oil into the ocean by just signing a document because you're the CEO of a company. Like, that could literally be anything that is causing our climate harm and that you know it, just like legal injustices. So yeah, the objective was to have people have a space to reflect on how these things make them feel and how they might plan to stop it in the future. The second part, we hope that understanding one's own relationship with the environment could spur positive, justice-centric climate action. So, this does not, in my opinion, need to be an outcome when you're weather journaling. I think it also just be like kind of a healthy practice. But for this study group, they were hoping that these people who they conducted on, once they understood how their climate anxiety and just like worries made them feel, they could use that reflection and spirit into something positive and actually take some action. So now that we have a little context, today's episode is going to be a little different. I will talk a bit about the journaling sessions and how they work, and then I'll also give you the opportunity to have some journaling time if you want. Totally optional. This is a bit of a more chill, laid back episode right before spring break, so nothing too crazy, just sit back and relax. So let's get into a little bit more context though. So there are two main types of weather journaling. Literal weather journaling is where you like genuinely journal about the weather every day, basically a weather forecast on your notebook. And in my opinion, and from what the research I've seen, this is more a hobby. Like, you're not really reflecting when you're just being like, okay, 70 degrees today in blank, blank, blank. Like, that's just not, in my opinion, very healthy when it comes to reflecting stuff. It's not unhealthy, but it's not productive, I would say the right word is. The other type that we're going to focus on today is when you're given a prompt based on climate change or climate anxiety, and reflect on that and focus on that in your journaling session. And this prompt could literally be anything. As cited in A Guide to Climate Anxiety Meditation by Tara Brach, which, if you don't know Tara Brach, she is amazing. She is I don't know what the best word to say is. She like leads a lot of meditations and like is a meditation expert. She's on a lot of different apps if you want to look her up. But she did a guide to climate anxiety meditation, and she said, and interestingly enough, she said the best way to get a most productive journaling session out of this is to trigger yourself intentionally. So it could be a part of a movie that triggers you, a song, or anything. Anything that makes you feel those complicated and just like nervous emotions when it relates to climate change. And when you start to feel these emotions, the moment you start to feel them, in fact, you should investigate what you're feeling, dig deep, and immediately start writing. It does not need to be an essay, an MLA format. It should literally just be what you're feeling. And this is when the creative writing kind of aspect comes into play. The journaling isn't like structured. You should write down whatever you want. However, try to focus on the type of self-reflection that will help us understand our emotions in the future when it relates to climate anxiety. If you want to just journal about science class, like, that's not the place to do it. Like, journal about that in your diary, or just journal about it in general, but not in your weather journaling. Just wanted to make that clear. Now, just for fun, I'm going to give you guys a prompt, and we're going to do it and describe it. Like I said, this is kind of a short episode, so I'll give you that prompt. I'll tell you what I feel when I hear that prompt as like a little bit of an example, and we'll just end off the episode. And if you want to continue journaling, you can. If you just want to listen and hear about it, that's it. But this was meant to be a bit of a quick one. So this is the prompt, and it's from the same Yale Sustainability Study Group. So the prompt for journaling is: think about the place you call home. How will it be impacted or not impacted by climate change? So I'll give you guys a second to think on that. I'll give us a minute, and then we'll come back and I'll say how I feel. good time to reflect and see what you thought of that prompt. Hopefully you got something out of this. If not, please give me feedback. I am always curious to hear what you guys think. Me personally, when I hear that prompt, I do think about it deeply. I don't personally struggle with climate anxiety, but it does make me think, at one point, the place where I call home, the place where I come home to every day, like, it won't be here because of climate change. And that is a scary thought. So it's interesting to reflect on that because I never, really think about that. However, I don't have as many like in-depth thoughts about it because, like I said, I don't struggle with climate anxiety, but I'd be really curious to hear what you guys think. So please let me know. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a bit of a short one this month, but I thought this would be a fun episode to do, even though it's not like a really in-depth topic. Please let me know if you try it with any other prompts. And yeah, thank you so much for listening to Weathering Minds. I'll see you next time.